As you probably all are painfully aware, I'm John Sherlin, the Chairman of the Board of Trustees. I imagine you're probably getting a little tired of hearing from me because it seems like I'm getting up here and talking to you folks about every 2 or 3 months. What we're going to do today is we would like to discuss with the congregation a potential sale of the Durbin Center. Just to give you a little bit of background, here a couple of years ago, we got an unsolicited offer for the Durbin Center, and at that time, the Board of Trustees voted not to accept that sale offer. Over the last 3 years or so, the Durbin Center has kind of fallen on hard times as far as cash flow and occupancy. Here recently, that's been starting to turn around, and on this first page of the handout, what we've presented here is a financial history for the Durbin Center since 2014. And you can see on that we reached a low point in rent income of $145,000 in year 2018. 2019, we've turned that around. We changed our management of that property in 2018 to Bill Lyons over at RE/MAX. And he's been doing a great job for us, as well as Dave Karonke, who's our Durbin Center representative for the trustees. He manages that property on our behalf, and they've both done a wonderful job of getting this turned around. And as you can see, we are actually getting to the point where we're starting to get close to making a profit. We've had some expenditures here recently that we've had to do, but we actually have a new tenant. Is that correct? Potentially a new tenant, Dave, is that right? Yeah.
It looks like we have a tenant for the third floor that'll be 3,100 square feet, and that's just huge for us. And that'll just leave one space on the lower level of 4,000 square feet. So right at this moment, we're about 2/3 rented out, and we're just barely breaking even. These numbers kind of indicate the 2/3 occupancy there. But with the third floor, that actually starts generating profit for us now, and we'll actually be able to start putting some money away. So,
thank you. Thanks, Dave. As you go down a little lower in this, you'll see that we've got listed an infrastructure liabilities column. And one of the things that we need to do to increase the profitability of this would be to invest $90,000 into a conversion to gas heat. And at some point, we're going to have to redo our parking lot, which is going to cost a significant amount of money, which, as you can see from the checking balance at the end of 2019, we don't have it. So in the interim, if we were to continue to operate this property and do what we need to do, I think to us it looks inevitable that we're going to need to go ahead and get some sort of a line of credit or extract some of the equity from this property in order to make these improvements. Because in the past, we've been able to give money to the church when the general fund has needed it. And at this point, with only $42,000 in our checking account, and if we get this new tenant, we're going to have to spend approximately, what was it, Dave, 20? Around $20,000 to make improvements for them to want to lease this space. So, that being said, one of the things that we are considering, of course, is the potential sale of this property. And the second page of this has actually a front and back. It's just simply the current financials for as of January of 2020. We currently are generating about $14,000 a month of rental income, and we're pretty much just breaking even, possibly going in the hole just a little bit. Of course, the following page, page 3, shows the trustees' financial capsule, and that's where we're really having problems. We've reached a point now in the Tate Fund where we have earmarked $100,000 for growth and emergency repairs, and we're not even at that point anymore. We've dipped below that, and we would have to refund that just to get us up to the $100,000 of emergency money that we need to have in that account. So, given the fact that we have significant number of repairs to this church that have to be done over the next few years. Number one, the Asbury Center needs $25,000 worth of roof. We've got $25,000 from the endowment fund, but where's the other $25,000 going to come from? We're either going to have to get this from the congregation, which, I don't know, you tell me. Are we going to be able to raise this kind of money? We've got a lot of improvements that are going to need to be done here, and we're having a hard time going month to month, week to week in the general fund. I don't know how we plan to squeeze any more money out of the congregation for these repairs. I really don't. If anybody's got some comments on that, I'd like to hear it. Does anybody have any input on this? This is a meeting. This isn't just me up here talking. So if you think we can raise 100,000, yes. Beg your pardon? Okay, this building, as you can see on the following page, in 2018, this appraisal was done at $825,000. That was done at a time when we had very low income. I'm sure that at this point in time, I'm not certain, given what's going on in the world these days, that this would appraise any higher than $825,000. And we have had some interest in this. Someone has expressed interest in this at a number north of that, but we don't have anything firm at this point. Dave?
When this was appraised, and it's the income approach, and it's not what the replacement value of it is, it's what the income is off the building, it drives it. And we were at a point where our occupancy was way down. There were two significant tenants looking at moving out, and our rents were really low. And so we've really raised our rents at least $5, $6 a square foot. And we have a higher occupancy rate, so we think it's going to be worth more money now than it was.
Does that answer your question? Yes.
I think it's always helpful to consider what is the purpose of owning the building, to think about whether or not the church wants to keep the building. Right. And secondly, in my experience working with church leaders across the country, is that the money is often tied to vision. So if there's a real powerful, strong vision for the congregation, even a congregation that's shrinking in size, people respond to that. But when a church is in survival mode or sort of declining mode, then there's just less money coming in because there's less of an imagined positive future. So I think that's one thing that's really critical, is to have a real positive vision. Third thing I want to say is that I office there, my husband does too, and it's a great building. There's a lot that's really great about it. It's, there's some rundown, et cetera, and there's problems with the way the parking lot ices over and people falling with snow. But there's a lot about that building that's really great, especially its location.
It appears to be a very solid structure. I think the original, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the original vision for purchasing this property was that we were eventually going to move the offices over there. Is that correct? Does anybody know?
My understanding, and we were here at the church at the time it was purchased, but it was for an educational classroom expansion. We had a plan drawn up to tear down the Sunrise Room and Asbury Center and do a $3 million addition clear to the corner there. And at that same time, this property became available, which was substantially less. And so we were thinking at the time that some of the classrooms would be placed on the third floor of the Durbin Center. And there would be a walkway across the alley to access those. And the church was growing. We've owned it for 20 years. So the church was still, really vibrant, and what are you going to do with all these people and everything? And I think that's, we're, like say, in the survival mode right now.
So so I think we've kind of gone past what the original intent was with this building. And so at this point, the Durbin Center has pretty much become, well, was a source of income. And I think it will eventually be if we can increase our, the number of tenants and get all our space occupied. I believe it will still continue to give us some income. The question is now is we've got some immediate needs that we're going to have to address. And yes.
John, just a quick question. Dave Mayer just answered it. When did we acquire the Durbin? I believe it's 1999. Really? Is that? It seems like it's forever. Maybe 20 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. And it's paid off. There is not any kind of a mortgage against it. The mortgage on that was paid off a number of years ago. So.
I was surprised that we're still getting depreciation on it.
As,
We do less than 10 cents.
Essentially, we don't pay income tax on the building, but we have had discussions with Ray Bader recently, and that we're set up.
We are set up with our tax program, and that is taking the depreciation on the building, and that's still allowed. I think it's a 40-year term or something, but we have had conversations with Ray Bader, our accountant. He's the church accountant and the accountant for the building over there, too. So. And another thing that I don't think John hit on too hard was the state office buildings under construction over here between Midwest and Collins Street. And I know if you drive by there, but that's 100,000 square feet of office space that's going to become available. And so the market is going to get just a whole lot more competitive because all the state offices are going to move into that building. And construction-wise, we're still about a year and a half out before that building will actually open. But that's on the horizon that the competition is going to be quite a bit more for office space here in town, too. And with the sale of the building, we will ask for what's called a restrictive covenant. And that covenant will allow us use of the parking lot after hours and on weekends. We won't have any liability as far as maintaining it or anything, but it's like a warranty deed, and it will follow the sale of the building. It will. So it's if we were to sell it and they turn around and sell it again, then that warranty deed would still follow the building, and that's real conventional to do that. So. We can use it, we'd have free use of it the whole weekend. You know, that would have to be something to be negotiated, but it is a contract and we'd have to work through that later if that circumstance changes. I don't have an answer for you, assuming with the square footage and everything we have there, that any one person would ask for all of our parking places. I don't see that happening. But potentially we'd have to move across the street with another parking lot. There's vacant lots across the street or something. You know, I'm saying at some point.
yeah, I think we'd have to make it an unrestricted covenant, right, where nobody can infringe upon any of our right to use that. Correct, Ken? Will we do something like that? Is it possible to put something together to where we can have a say over whether or not anybody else can use that parking lot on the weekend?
Sure. And depending on what it would be, we can make it an exclusive right. Only the church can use that.
There you go. Okay.
Or, if they have some occasional use for it, or just like you say, it's hard to envision who would move in and
You know, and
all that parking.
we may want to be the good neighbor, and maybe we do the snow removal over there or something like that, if they, or things like that. But a good neighbor with the folks there. Let it.
No, this would be separate, completely separate. We would use that for primarily, we would invest it not within the foundation, right? It would be outside the foundation. We would invest it for income to fund improvements to the church properties. Yes?
Are you concerned that we'll spend through that, just like we have with tape, unless we change our income expense profile are we just going to work our way through all that money also?
That's tempting, but we are not trying to do that. We talk about vision. We would like to set this up for the next 20, 30 years, that this investment will continue to fund infrastructure to this church for a long time to come. We're not going to say, boy, let's just fix everything and this church is brand new this day and then have no money in the bank. This comes, this won't happen again. Or it'll take be miraculous if we have another shot to put this kind of money away to fund our infrastructure.
You made a great point, because right now, where do you get a risk-free rate of return of any proportion, right? Almost nothing. Look at what's going on in the financial markets. Yeah, it's been great for the last 10 years. What are the next 10 years going to look like? I wish I knew. Because if you go for the risk-free rate of return, you're going to get 2% right now. If you're lucky, you might be able to get, I don't know. That's always a risk when you invest in anything. Real estate can go down, but one thing about real estate, it tends to hold its value and also produce income. Correct? Tell me if I'm talking about attorney. That's my perception of it. Is that real estate does vary in price, year to year. In general, it's gone up over the long term, and it has been a more stable source of income sometimes than financial investments, whether it be stocks, bonds, or whatever. There's times when it's great, times when it's bad. Yes.
I was interested in your comment that the money will be invested outside the foundation. So this building does not fall under the same things like our parsonages did?
No.
Where the money...
No. This is owned by the church here. It's not owned by the foundation. Because I believe the endowment, am I correct? The endowment's owned by the foundation. Is that right? Correct? Okay.
The foundation, the endowment is owned by the church, but it's administered by at this point, by the conference. I have another, is it possible?
Why don't you use this here so we can hear you?
Obviously I'm partial to investing money in real estate because I understand real estate. And I've really struggled with this because George Bryce and I worked so hard to get this done. And one of the primary drivers was we had no parking for this church, very little parking. And so I've really struggled with this, but I guess where I am is perhaps God's intent for this was it was a forced savings account that we couldn't spend very easily, although we did take lots of money out of it and put that into the general fund. So what I am trying to reconcile myself to is that I guess it's a blessing that we have this asset that we can monetize. My only concern is that I think those monies should be earmarked or somehow strictly managed so that we're not just fiddling away the money on operating expenses. That would be a real heartbreak. A real heartbreak. I mean, we as a congregation have to get real about our operating costs versus our income. And I would really be heartbroken if we used the Durbin Center funds as a bailout and not change any of the things that we're doing.
You make a good point, Bob. I mean, the congregation really hasn't had to pony up much money over the last, since the Tate Fund came into existence, right? Our congregation's basically got I don't know if this mischaracterizes this, but that's gotten a free ride on maintaining infrastructure. We've not had to really put any significant amount of money into maintaining this property. Remember that we did the capital raise thing when I first got on trustees, Ken, for the roof? We got that done, but other than that, you know, for the most part, we haven't had to do that. And I agree. Our intent is to, if we do get this money, we're not going to just go out on some crazy spending spree and start making a bunch of repairs that are unnecessary. Okay, we're gonna try to be very, very frugal with this money. That's our intent, because this is it, right? I mean, at this point, with this, if we blow this, we're in big trouble as a church. We're not going to have the money. I think probably the thing to do is set up some covenant or some sort of a structure in the title holding company, because the title holding company will still exist, correct? And what we'll have to do is we'll set up some sort of a structure to where we cannot spend any more than earnings on any. We got to at least maintain earnings plus some growth rate for inflation. I don't see how else you do it without, you know.
It will be the goal of the trustees to protect this investment. And what is driving a lot of this is our capital campaign. That we've got some things here that just aren't going to wait any longer. We're had some significant issues with the hot water heating system this year and got through it. The elevator has become a real problem for us now. The roof at Asbury Center, like John talks about. So it would give us a source of income that we can start planning and doing these things, but we can't just jump in and do the whole capital campaign at once. But that is the intent and the capital campaign was set up 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years too. And so I think the initial was $300,000, but I think those things can change around on it and stuff, but we've got to start generating some income.
If we had a benefactor like the Tates anymore, would you consider earmarking this fund and restricting this funds to where it was used as matching funds? So if you had a project, then let's say you could pull 50 grand out of the Durbin Center funds, the congregation would have to step up and match it so that we take some ownership in the things that are happening in the church.
I think that's a great idea, and the trustees have got to get the fine tuning on this. And one of the things that's happened recently is there is some interest in a purchase of the building. And we're just in the very early stages, but there is someone who might be interested at more of a market value, certainly not where it was appraised at last time. And because financially the building's just in a lot better shape now. And like it was pointed out earlier here that building is a significant building. There aren't any structural problems with it. It just, it's a real solid building. So it would be a good investment.
Yeah, and the trustees may in fact decide to hold a vote on this. We have that right if we want to do that. We have the ability, if we decide that we don't want to just have 9 people make the decision on this, we can set up a vote within the congregation to do this. Because one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to steamroll everybody and just say, this is, look, the 9 of us are going to make this decision for everyone else. And we're not comfortable, we're not completely comfortable with doing that. Here, let me give you this. I think people are happy. Well, yeah.
I sort of thought this meeting was to take a vote to sell it. But let's not delay it so long that we miss a potential buyer. I mean, if you have somebody interested, don't delay too long.
Well, we have a trustees meeting this upcoming Thursday, so this is certainly something we're going to, oh, sorry, back off. Well, this is certainly something we will discuss on our meeting this coming Thursday as to how we plan to proceed with this. If we're just going to go ahead and do it, or if we'll have a actual vote, church vote, to get this. But I understand, and that we don't want to miss this opportunity, and I don't know that it's not very firm, so it's something. Yeah.
Does everyone understand that the title holding company owns the Durbin Center, and that the Board of Trustees are essentially the officers of the title holding company? And that's why we're not voting today, is because the church doesn't have to vote on it, but the trustees want to know what you think, because this does belong to us. Correct? Yeah.
That's correct, but by the same token, I don't know how else we would gauge the sentiment of the congregation without holding some sort of a vote, whether it be official or not. You got one?
My question is, are we selling just the building, or are we selling the parking lot and the building, or are we selling, what are we selling? Because if we're selling just the building, hey, I'm willing to get rid of that, but I think that the church ought to maintain and keep the parking lot on the other side of the alley. And since it's our building, we ought to be able to split it off any way we want to.
Okay, I'm sure that would require some sort of an agreement with the new owner to have access to that parking lot.
As we have a need for that parking lot, that building would be worthless if we couldn't offer off-street parking. The tenants have to have off-street parking, and there aren't many parking places with some of the permanent residents downtown and stuff here. There just isn't much parking. So we really, the parking lot has to go with that building, but it also gets us away from the maintenance of that parking lot. And I actually have quotes that it was going to be almost $200,000 to repave that parking lot over there. It's to the point where it has to be completely taken out, resloped and done. And so it's one of the things on the list of our, for the Durbin Center here. You know, and for the Durbin Center, and John hit on this slightly too, it's electric heat, and the bills are just huge. They've been as high as $60,000 a year on the Durbin Center for the electric heat. And we have a plan to put in boilers and change the gas heat, which could significantly cut that and be a huge, I mean, $25,000, $30,000 in savings, and yet we can't get the money together to do the gas heat. We need $90,000 to do the gas heat. And we've run a gas line up the back of the building.
That's why we're talking about.
Yeah.
A line of credit.
Right, that line of credit and stuff and start doing some of that stuff, because if we could put that much more money in the bank, then the Durbin Center is going to be a lot more healthy financially, but we don't have that cash fund where we can draw from and say, let's just do it now and get it over with. So we've been working, we have some of the hot water lines in. I mentioned the gas line's been put in, and we've got a plan of where they're going to go and what they're going to be, but we just don't have the money to get it started. So.
But you will address the parking in large part by retaining a covenant that we have use of it at nights and on the weekends.
Yeah, that's correct. That's kind of what Dave was saying, is that we get out from under the liability of having to repave the parking lot, but still have use of it, and maybe we work out a deal with whoever owns that. Part of that will be that we'll take care of snow removal. This is kind of a good faith gesture.
Would it be helpful to just get a feel for this group? Do you want to do kind of a straw poll, or what can we do to help you guys get where you want to get?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Let's just do that here. So, and this restrictive covenants is a legal document, and I've had an attorney help me with that. And so it's not something we're just making up. This is like a warranty deed. We've got the wording for it, fill in the blanks. It applies to the Durbin Center. So this is a legal document. It's not something we're just saying, well, shaking the hand and saying, you guys will let us use this parking lot. It will be on the deed that we'll have use of the parking lot. And do you want to call for a vote, John?
Well, wait, there might be other comments before you call for.
We can do it, raise of hands of, well,
We just show of hands and
I guess start out, is there any objection or anyone to object to selling the Durbin Center? Yay. Oh.
I just want to make sure that the funds just don't go in the general fund and you use it for what you're talking about.
And the general fund isn't such a problem now, but if we start donating money to the general fund, this fund will disappear. The general fund has to support itself. And we as a congregation have to come up with the money for the general fund. So we will protect this investment with the wording, and we would ask for help from the congregation maybe in doing that, of how once this is in the bank, what are we going to do?
So you're not going to take this money and operate the church with it?
Oh, no. And no, that is, like I said, we're...
How do you keep the next board of trustees from doing it?
Well, I think maybe we start introducing some bylaws that are attached to that, similar to the Tate. There's $100,000 in the Tate Emergency Fund, which we've had to dip into. And I mean, I guess we can't do that, but what the vision of this is, this will fund the infrastructure in this church for a long time. We're not going to come back to you guys in 5 years and say, whoops, we spent all that, now.
Wait, you're going to use this as the capital campaign for the church? Is that what you're
What's
saying?
that? No, we are not going to use this. I'm sorry, that didn't come out right then. This is not, our intent is the vision to set this so that the congregation doesn't have to worry about infrastructure or can only participate to a certain degree. The Durbin Center will fund our infrastructure is what we're hoping for. But like the suggestion you made where maybe some help, 50-50 from the congregation, the Durbin Center. And it's going to be a long-term plan. We don't have that money up front. So yeah, we've got to start planning once there's some investment income that starts coming in.
The endowment committee has very written structure on what we are allowed to spend that money on and what we are not. I would hope that this, because it's easy when you two are the trustees, it may not be as easy 4 years from now to have that money restricted. If you're going to sell it, because I think your stock roll would actually look different if it was going to go in the general fund or if it was going to be truly set aside for repairs and maintenance. And I would hope that you guys would formulate a formal thing, something similar to what the endowment has as far as restrictions on the use of that money.
Within a corporation, would we be able to do that, Ken? Set up some sort of operating agreement or whatever we would call it, that would say that we would have to get approval from the church? If that's what you folks want to do. If that's what you're thinking is that we get the whole church to have to agree on spending this money, we can do that. Is that not correct? If somebody's worried about the next board of trustees going on a spending spree and just blowing all this cash, you tell me how we would restrict it. I'm not an attorney or anything like that.
Well, I'm only a recovering attorney, so. But Diane is correct that there are several restrictions and several ways in which the endowment money is restricted. And there's a lot of fail-safes. It's not just a vote of the endowment. I mean, I think if we wanted to do something drastic, I happen to be on that committee, as is Rhonda and as is Diane. But if we wanted to do something radically different than what is currently in the bylaws of the endowment, it would take a vote, I believe, of the board of stewards, and it would even require, I don't know if it requires a church conference. I don't know if it's a charge conference, but it requires there's a lot of fail-safes before you can make that kind of change.
So
if we decided we were going to suddenly start funding, or contributing to the general fund, that would require a major alteration and permission from a lot of different sources before that could happen. Am I stating that right, Rhonda? Because
Yeah, there's restrictions so that the only thing that can be used for instance, requests for mission, new missions, or new missions, not operating costs, is that we can use the earnings, a percentage.
right.
A percentage, which isn't a very big percentage, so that the fund continues to grow. I'm hearing two different messages here. I'm hearing you say that you intend to use this for repairs, maintenance, and infrastructure here in the church in lieu of a capital campaign?
You know, we would still like to have a capital campaign, and we've been trying, well, to be quite frank, with our transition to ministers, it just, Brian was on board with it, we're moving ahead, and Janet was really moving ahead, and now we would still like to do a capital campaign, yes.
But you're saying the money that will come out of the Durbin Fund will be used to do the repairs that we anticipated a capital campaign. So there is an intent to use the money from the Durbin Center to fix up the church. Am I understanding that correctly?
The investment income, we are going to try to protect the principal. Is that correct? That's right. It'd be our goal to protect the principal, and what wording we come up with that would allow us to do that, so future administrations can't say, well, we just need the money, so let's take it out of there. But we understand that we aren't going to have another opportunity like this.
I was the one that said that I didn't think we should do the capital campaign because we weren't even supporting the general fund. And if we have a capital campaign that's not successful, it doesn't go along with our vision, and it's a morale breaker. So I think that maybe, Ronna, there's we could take the money from the Durbin Center and invest it and not use any of it for the infrastructure of the church. That's an option. The other option is to take some of the money or the interest and use it to repair the church. Is that?
I'm just asking because I'm really concerned that we'll just fiddle through this.
We are not going to piddle through this money so long as I'm your pastor. We will not do that. We're not piddling through this money. I don't know what happened and why we piddled through the Tate Fund. I wasn't here. But if the leadership of the church is on board with spending this money wisely, then that's not going to happen. Because like Ken said, there's oversight. If we use our system properly, there is oversight. So I think that maybe what you're talking about is trust. Do you trust the leadership of the church not to piddle the money away? I trust the leadership of this church to spend it wisely.
I trust the leadership of this church to spend it wisely also, but I kind of like, because I trust the leadership of this church, I would kind of like them to put things in place, like Ken just said, so that it guides future leadership to also protect that money. And if there are some kind of, I don't know, designated fund, some way so that it provides future leadership some restrictions, yes.
Board of Trustees and all of the fellow brothers and sisters in Christianity, I firmly believe that we ought to just say, Board, go for it, come up with a price, come up with the total plan that you want and how it's going to be handled, and then come back to the congregation of the church, since you're the ultimate decision makers, and say, this is what we've got, this is what we've got planned, and at that point in time and stuff, the church should be able to say A or nay. Right now, we just hash over little things, different things, this and that, and if you've got something that you need and you've got a concern, give it in writing to a board member and let the board chew on it and decide, and that way they can come up with the correct nuances to either affect the sale or reject the sale or whatever they're going to do, because ultimately it is the board's decision, and right now they're just feeling, and it looks to me like they're running around in the dark and hoping and praying that this will happen or this won't happen. I've trusted them because they're on that board of trustees. There are elders in the church, and they can handle this, and they can come back to our congregation and say to us, this is what we've got, this is how we want to do it, and this is what we're going to have on it, and this is what we will set aside. And we can say, yes, go for it, or I don't like it, and we hope that we'll get rid of you. That's the only way I can put it, but I think this is the best way to go. Let them do everything and have it handled. Good luck.
Thank you.
I had a question on the snow removal. I think that if we give them, pay for the full amount of the snow removal for use of the parking lot, I think that's a little bit much in some ways. I think if we would give them like a percentage of the snow removal, because sometimes, you know, it may snow Sunday, Monday afternoon, and it's gone by the next Sunday. We're not going to be using it a lot of the time when they will have to use the snow removal. So I don't think that we're going to be using the parking lot for the total amount use of the snow removal. And the snow removal is quite expensive. So I think if we do a certain percentage, or maybe on certain days on having it when they remove the snow, but not a total price of the snow removal.
But it would not be a contractual thing. We aren't going to decide on our lease that we'll take care of whatever. I mean, this would be more of an agreement between us and the new owner. What will be contractual should be just the use of the parking lot. And we won't commit to a long-term maintenance of anything on that. It'd be more of an agreement, you know, if that's the way it works out. But we don't really have to offer anything. That was just a suggestion.
Short timer, concern I have right now, we can't pay our bills. We've got $1 million endowment and we still can't pay our bills.
I think it's $500,000. Or you mean you're talking about from the, if we were to get this from the, if we were to get $1 million out of this?
We still can't pay our bills. Pretty soon we're not going to have church.
We're getting there. I mean, we're getting close to the point where we don't have the money in trustees to do anything, quite honestly. With the restrictions to the Tate Fund, we're pretty much not able to.
What I'm hearing is this money's going to go into a similar situation with the same restrictions or similar.
Correct.
So I guess my point is we need to take care of the home first. I mean, if we could use part of this to fix up the building, that's very expensive. But we have to be able to take care of the bills that come in the new food. An endowment set in some place isn't going to help us if we have to go to the church because we can't pay bills.
That's correct. Yeah, that's true. If we put some sort of restriction on it to where we don't go anything other than our earnings on it, then of course I don't think we'll have a choice but to go to the congregation and try to get the capital. So, yeah, I don't know what else. You can't have it both ways.
Thank you. There's all kinds of, I think, insightful and earnest comments about how capital money has been used by the trustees over the past 10 to 15 years.
and I don't mean to explode this meeting because you got a service here coming up, but one of the things that has not been mentioned, and one of the things that has, having been on the Board of Trustees 5-6 years ago, one thing that that really pressed on the trustees when I was on the board was the amount of money that we were pouring into King's Corner, which has never been mentioned all day. Those of you who are natives of Casper know that that was an old Safeway store back in the 40s, maybe even before that. And we haven't talked about this, but right now everything is calm with King's Corner, I guess. I haven't been to your meeting. Exactly. What's another 67,000? But my point is, what happens if something goes wrong over there again? Then are we going to be tempted by to use some of this money that might come from Durbin Center? And I have to say, I think that all of us, and not just the Board of Trustees, because I think they're getting a bit of an unfair rap here, and I don't think anybody means it personally, but there's been a lot of, shall we say, apathy among all of us and the Board of Stewards in terms of, you know, we're like a government. We all want lots of government, but we don't want to pay for it. We want lots of things in our church, but we're not, and we budget, but we're not willing to pay for them. We want a great music program, but we're not willing to, we think that somebody's going to roll into town as the McIntyres did 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and do it for nothing. And those things just aren't going to happen in 2020. The world is not the way it was in the 50s. So I think that before we, again, I don't explode this meeting because we don't have time to do that, but Rebecca is right on when she talks about what is our vision for the church. Part of the vision is how we use King's Corner. Because I can tell you, I was on trustees when we bought King's Corner, back when Bill Imes was the pastor. And the way it's used today has nothing to do with the vision that we had for that. And I'm not criticizing how it's being used today, but I'm saying this is not, we're not using it the way we visioned using it when it was acquired. And we had no idea, of course, I don't know why, that it would prove to be such a money pit. But it's going to continue. It's not getting any younger. So I think that is an issue, John, that the trustees also needs to kick around so that when we are called upon to make a final determination about Durbin Center, that we be cognizant of what are the needs going to be for that building, and how are we going to deal with those if we have another crisis, if we need another roof, or goodness knows what we might need. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate everything, but that's a big elephant in the room, and it has caused more, I think, more expense to our church than almost anything else. So we need an overall plan on that. Thanks, John.
What do you think? I know, Ronnie, you've got opinion on that as well. Okay, Gail, here. We'll call it.
This is just about King's Corner, and Ann Carlson and I do the thrift shop, and we had a call recently that the King's Corner is out of budget, and they wanted to know if we could let go of some of our funds. So I know there are problems over at the King's Corner.
Speaking on this.
I think Ken's right. That was bought when Melva was, you and Melva and a bunch of people were on trustees, and it was bought long-term for parking because we didn't have this parking. But in the interim, it was intended to be a youth center because our youth program was considerably bigger than it is now. I understand that there's a group in our church that is very passionate about the mission that's going on at King's Corner, and I would never dispute that. But the question that I would pose is the broad congregation is not very involved in that. That's one question. Secondly, are you passionately tied to the mission, or are you passionately tied to the building? Because that building is a money pit. It just is. So if the mission is valuable, maybe we need to consider where else we could do that mission. That building would sell in a New York second to Hilltop Bank or to the Episcopalians.
Thank you. So as you can all tell, we've got a lot of issues we got to deal with trustees. And like I said earlier, we're going to have a meeting. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick. We're going to have a meeting this Thursday, and I think one of the things I'm going to propose is that if we do proceed with a sale of the Durbin Center, that we will involve the congregation and not just make the decision with 9 people. Does that sound fair? Okay. Hey, well, thank you for your input. It's been very valuable. I'm glad we held this. Thank you. Welcome.